Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm glad that you're still here on the conference, and yeah, I'm really happy to see you here, the full hall. And few words about me. So this is me. Oh, yeah, it's me in the nearest future. So I'm from Wrocław, and these dwarfs are a symbol of Wrocław in Poland. Okay, yeah, this is actually me, and I'm a .NET developer with a big .NET background for 10 years, or a little bit less. Okay, I used to be a blogger for a long time, and I'm really glad to talk about different technologies, and I'd like to encourage you to use something new to learn something new. And I'm also aspect-oriented programming advocate, technology advocate, how it's called right now, not evangelist, so I'm not trying to put you in this religion, but to show how you can use it in your real life with real-life examples. And yeah, here you can see my email, my Twitter, so if you have any questions, feel free to email me about a post-sharp or just about .NET technologies, say thank you, or ask for a presentation. And today I'd like to talk about safety from different perspective, because we as developers, we work with a really complicated code. And with enterprise technologies, the main characteristic of the code is maintainability, and it should be safe for us as developers from the perspective of maintaining and making any modifications. And we have a lot of tools for this. Not only Volvo, yeah, because when you think about safety, you start thinking about Volvo, and Volvo is about safety. Yeah. So we have a few tools that help us to make sure that our applications work correctly. And the first one is .NET by itself. So it's a compiler that could provide you some feedback that you didn't make some grammar mistake, that you didn't miss some semicolon or something else. The next one is Visual Studio, so it provides quite complicated and sophisticated checks that everything works from the very beginning, so you didn't miss namespaces or something like this as well. And currently Visual Studio provides you a lot of additional things, and you could write it on your own with Roslyn, for example, to provide this safety network. Also, we have contracts, and it's more sophisticated and business-oriented. And if you use all of this if before the code execution and the checks after the method, you probably use these code contracts in some elementary way. And the last one is a style cop. It's more about the styles. I personally don't use it and don't like, to be honest. But yeah, it's a good tool if you have a large project base and you have to follow some general guidelines and rules with your team, right? And how it could help us, from my perspective, in this case. It's hard to say that it will help. So how much time does it take to find the real business logic here? So a few seconds. So you have to read all those lines of code and recognize where is the business logic. And usually, with some scale, it will be only 2 lines. The rest is some additional infrastructure code that supports you from business perspective, from security, and so on. So we have some login code, then some validation, security checks. And finally, we have only 2 lines that reference to real business logic, right? The rest can be done somewhere else. And yeah, you could use aspect-oriented programming and frameworks to remove all of this boilerplate code, save a lot of line codes and make your life simpler. Because someone, let's say you as a senior developer or a lead architect, could write these attributes and provide it to the rest of the team. So you save a lot of time. And we're going to move from this implementation when business logic tightly coupled with the login, caching, security, other aspects, to more onion-like representation when business logic concentrated within a method. So it will be much safer for you to observe the code, understand it, and if we have less lines of code, it's harder to make a mistake, right? It's still possible to make a mistake in a hello world, but since it's only one line, it's really hard. And yeah, you probably saw this diagram. It's not reference to some particular topic that I'm going to describe, but all of these cross-cutting concerns can be addressed with aspect-oriented and different things. It can be encapsulated in one class. And I'm going to show you something that you could use to validate your design decision in your solution. So here's the definition for aspect-oriented programming. And the most important here, I think, is increased modularity. This is the most important. So we could just decouple all of this boilerplate code somewhere. And we have a few frameworks that provide us this possibility. So it's 40. It's free of charge. I think everyone at least heard about it. The next is PostSharp, Monocecil, and a group of different tools that I called Interceptor. Yeah, because they are not a real aspect-oriented tool. So they works as an adapters. And how does aspect-oriented programming works? So it's magic. And the magic can be of two types. It can be intermediate language within, when you have modified your code at the stage when you get intermediate language code, and interception. So the true magic happens with the first type of tooling. So you have almost no limitation. You could even instrument constructors in some bright future. And interceptors, mostly like as imposters, and they work as decorators. So you could write it on your own quite easily, right? And it's very limited, so you could instrument only public methods, and that's all. So no private, no static, no events, no properties. And I'm going to talk about PostSharp, and I have a few vouchers for you for good questions to distribute. So yeah, it's kind of pricey, but you could ask for discounts. And for Russia and Belarus and Ukraine, Gail provide discounts. Some boring technical details. I wouldn't stop here for a long time, so you could read it on a requirements page. But the good news that it's support already .NET Core 2 and .NET Standard 2, so in the latest releases. And it have a few built-in features that you wouldn't implement on your own. So it's internal implement, internal protected naming convention, and you will see examples for these attributes during the demo. And you could apply it from the code, so it have a very good integration with Visual Studio. So don't get me wrong, so it's not as kind of advertisement and marketing presentation. So the next will be a demo, so I wouldn't stop on the tool anymore. And I'd like to show you some built-in things and then more complicated or sophisticated that requires only a few lines of code. So the first one is about internal implement and naming convention. So time for demo. And yeah. So Visual Studio. So the first example is about internal attribute. And there might be the case when you have to make a constructor like here, public one, just to use it in inversion of control framework, because otherwise it wouldn't recognize the constructor. But from design perspective, it should be internal and no one should be allowed to use it outside of this library. So it's not so rare situation as you might think. And I can do it easily in this way, so just provide an internal attribute, and it would work. So here I have a test, so it's green. I could run them once again. And because I could also show that I couldn't use it from other libraries, but I'd like to save some time, and I hope that you believe me. Anyway, this code is available on a GitHub, and you could check it on your own. And if I remove this internal, okay, I will, and provide private here, let's say, or internal, so it wouldn't work as well, and build it. So you see that it builds, succeeded, right? So still no problems, but if I run the test, you could see that inversion of control couldn't find out this constructor. So it says that specified argument was out. No, it's about parameter name. It must to have at least, yeah, about a constructor. So it should be a public constructor to be plugged in to use it in a structure map. So it works. Yeah, it might be not so excited, but as I work as an architect and a technical leader, so I want to be sure that developers use this capability of the language in a proper way. Another one is about internal implementation, and it says that some interface can be implemented only in this particular library. And you might ask, why do I need this? And here's an example with a payment strategy. I think that in some cases you might want to provide ability to use this interface just because of a, again, inversion of control, or you would like to give a possibility for others to use it as a parameter, but you wouldn't give a possibility to write its own implementation. Maybe here might be some sensitive logic. You just don't want to delegate it to others. And in this case, you could instrument interface, and all other classes will be checked from architectural perspective that implementation only in one library. And if I, for example, would like to re-implement it in other project, so you can see it's a different project, right? And yeah, some maybe malicious code that I'd like to provide a salary for myself is several billions. And I'm trying to build it. I will get an error. Wait a second, I will just make it a little bit narrow so you can read it. Yeah, so you cannot apply or re-implement it because it's have attributes internal implementation. So I think it's quite useful. And of course, from the very beginning, it might be quite hard to change all the codes, and you could use different severity levels, warning or errors, and you still can have compilable code, but with a lot of warnings. That will be signs that something is wrong with your code. And the last one that I think from built-in capabilities is about naming conventions. And you can see here that I have a set of adapters, so it can be view models, whatever you want, that have a same prefixes or postfixes. And it's very common in ISP, right, .NET Core. So you might think everyone should follow this naming convention, and you want to force it because you also could use feature of inversion of control frameworks, such as a scan. So you don't add manually every implementation and every interface. You just tell in the inversion of control framework, please scan this assembly and gather all classes that have some prefix or postfix in the name. So you follow the naming convention, and you will get automatically registered. So it will also save you a lot of time, and you wouldn't forget to add it in your registry. So I have 3 classes. You see there is no attributes, but if I add new adapter that does not follow some rules, you could see, oh, there's errors. So okay, I will remove it a little bit later, but here's order adapter X does not respect the naming convention, so it should answer on adapter only. And you might think, wow, what's the magic? So how I could do this? And you could apply attributes on assembly level, because from other perspective, it's kind of silly to add attributes here, because if you write this class, you already have to follow naming conventions. So I could apply it from the assembly level. What a nice feature. So, and I cover all future classes from one place, right? And I could also provide the severity types, this pattern, how I'd like to search for these classes names, and I could use wildcards or regular expression. Okay, and but this kind of basic one, right? I just return it to public, so it will compile without any errors. And let's talk about more interesting things. So back into presentation, not in this way. Yep. Yep. No. Okay. And the most interesting thing that, yeah, you could implement it, also PostSharp support debugging. There is the line how you can use it, but it's not a true lazy way, because true developers should be lazy. And you could set up as an automatic tool, then you could add it to your toolbar as a separate button and a hotkeys. So it's not a big deal for debugging. So you could see how you write this code and debug it just in a regular way. So no magic happens from your perspective. And also, PostSharp provides additional functionality to write this architecture validation. So you could check this basic one as a first bullet for analyze and validate code in assembly type property, advanced color constraint, and reference constraints, so it could analyze full solution or just one library, how your code is used. And I'm going to provide you a few examples, but first, how to write this. So the first, you have to identify an annoying problem that's really bothering you. And all the next examples will be from real life that I'm trying to implement and bring to a project, because I couldn't live with this kind of a code. So, and I'd like to eliminate it. So the first one is a type level constraint. If you'd like to check how particular code is implemented, the structure, then still step one, you could use color or referential one. And here you could see the two templates, validate code and validate constraint, because you could also validate at which part of the code you could apply these constraints. And use your imagination and some magic to implement it with a PostSharp and reflection, and then just enjoy sharing knowledge with the colleagues, because when you write this validation, you could just copy-paste it to any other project, because it's not coupled with the business logic. So, demo. And this is my personal pain point. So I don't like the static modifier, because it really makes hard to write proper unit tests. And I think that only a few cases are legal for this static, and I will show this. Also, I'm really bothered about usage inversion of control and dependency injection, because a lot of people use it in a wrong way, just as a service locator, and call this registration and instantiation from different places inside the methods. And when I'd like to write the test, I just couldn't see from the signature of the method what type of the services should I provide. The next one is instantiation, that I don't want to see the new keyword inside my method, so everything should be provided as the parameters. And the right violation is because of a legacy, and we use a lot and hibernate in virtual methods. So let's go to the code samples. So the first one is about the static. My personal pain, I hate them. And okay, we have service, yeah, architectural types. So no static, yes. So no static example. And yeah, I could see here that my ugly enterprise class have underline line. And it's not a magic, so it says that I have some aspects applied to this class. So you wouldn't get lost and you wouldn't ask yourself, why it's working this particular way? Because you could see the hints from the Visual Studio. And you could see here that, yeah, I could have some static strings. Also, it can be used as a constant, and in general, you use in this way. But I haven't here public property static or public method static. But at the same time, you could see extension method, and it should be totally legal because we have no other ways to implement it, right? So as you can, as you remember, it's built successfully. If I add here static and try to compile, you will see that it's failed, and it says that looks like you're increasing house in a project using static modifier. So please don't do this. And you see that it says nothing about these static classes, right? So static bool, blah, blah, blah. And if I change it to private static, it wouldn't mind if you do this. So you can see build succeeded. Why? Because if I have a private static, it's not influenced so much on other code. So no one can use it outside the class, so it might be totally okay, right? At least for me. I don't know, you might have another one opinion, and I will glad to argue about it during the coffee breaks. And how it was implemented. So you might think it's kind of hard, but it requires only a few lines of code. Yeah, you could think that it's more than one screen, but according to the number of lines, it's only 20 lines of code, and most of the lines are just compacted to be on a one screen with a high size. The logic is really simple. So you override compile time validate, check for abstract and sealed, what it means static, and just search for public methods. Public methods, properties, extension, you're going to exclude here. So this is actual thing where, no. It's, yeah, we get all the methods and we get all methods and then accept extension. So we check then through the collection. Do we have anything static or not? And the rest is a message, so it could show the exact place where to point you in the error message. So I think it's pretty simple. The next one is about this inversion of control. And where I have it, yes, I have a cheat sheet. Here, service layer, okay. Should be, wait a second. Oh, I get lost in my examples. Come on. Okay, I will get from other direction. Yes, no, It's entity. Okay, I will start from this one. I will get another one a little bit later. So in Hibernate, it's our also pane. It's happened sometime when someone going to override these virtual properties, and we'd like to prohibit this. So how it can be implemented also with additional interfaces or attributes, and they were applied on a assembly level in 4 as well. So no static, no explicit override, and it's also quite simple. So here's generating the error messages, and you can see that only a few lines of code gives you the ability to check is it overridden or not. With some helper classes that's provided by a post-sharp reflection search, it could look for whole assembly, all projects where it was used. So it's pretty simple, and you get all derived types and check if it was used somewhere or not. And yeah, finally, I think, yeah, this reference check. Most interesting one with something that you could also implement and check in your code. So the first one will be about using service locator container inside the code. And so it should compile right now, yes, and if I uncomment it. So you can see that in my service I try to get this container, and this is anti-pattern, because I couldn't get information what can be retrieved from this container inside the method. So I have no signs or evidence from the method signature. When I compile, I will get also error message that no service locator anti-pattern in my code. Because yeah, you know this good practice that it should be passed by parameters. And how it's implemented. Service location policy, I could provide also where it should be applied by a target namespace, provide severity of the error. And implementation also very simple. You see only one screen with almost 200% of the magnification. I also using here a reflection search to find out where it might be used. See that very simple code. Really, if you're using reflection more or less on a daily basis, or maybe not on a daily basis, but you are aware about it, you could quite easily to implement this. I thought from the very beginning that it would take me maybe a few hours, but no. It's only when you imagine this algorithm, you could implement it in 10 minutes. With experiments, of course, with some debugging, because I'm not a genius to remember what kind of properties should I ask, how it's work in a very precise way, always declaring type, using methods, and so on. So maximum 30 minutes, half an hour requires to you to implement this. And when you write it once, you could reuse it anywhere. So just copy paste. And what else? Yeah, here's instantiation validation. I'm going to comment this. Oh. Control. No. Okay. And yeah, another one, anti-pattern. When you get some service inside the method, and you could provide some exception attributes, and inside the attributes in the service location policy, let's say you could check, oh, it's allow attribute and where it was used, because I have a very weak memory. In aspects, yeah, here I could even check, should I provide these checks or not? Here, if I have this allow attribute, I just skip this check. So it's very, very flexible. Yeah, maybe that's why I don't remember the exact implementation, because I wrote it once and use it without holding in memory all the details and how it's works. Yeah, this is the main error, main issue with this. Implement once and use it everywhere. So after a few months, you just forget about it. Okay, and looks like here should be some final example. Yeah, no explicit instantiation policy. So I want to restrict explicit instantiation using a new operator with any class that implements this interface, myService. So you can see that I have a few, or okay, at least one, and I want others to use inversion of control. So this would be illegal. So you agree that from any standard tools, it's kind of hard or impossible to provide this sort of a checks, because it's completely ruined the whole idea of using inversion of control. So if I run it, you see that there should be no explicit instantiation. And I could even navigate where it was used. I could select to other classes just to show it more precisely. You see? Easy as that. And implementation also not very big. So you can see that I'm going to validate this code. It's not referenced here, so it's very simple. And I could get this specific location by using this usage reference and using method. So when I get it somewhere before. So only a few lines of code and you get a very powerful tool for checking in your code how developers are using your libraries and classes in general. Okay, back into presentation. That you might argue that aspect-oriented programming takes a lot of time during the compilation, and the time could increase significantly. But you could use compilation time symbols and provide a few setup for a project. So I showed this example, with a no static and no explicit override, that you could provide these compile symbols, and it will just removed if you're going to compile it for a production, and if you would like to save some time. But the differences in time not so big, and this is one of the drawbacks. But I've checked the speed on a small project, on a real one, on a big project with no static, and you see the number of files, size of the code base. You see that the big project is, it was really quite big. And before I had 639 warnings in general. When I add these static checks, I find out that I get additional 229 warnings. It's still compilable, but I know for sure that this difference is exactly a reference to the static classes that I should check. So, and now imagine how much time would I spend if I'd like to find out them manually. Just with the static, it might be illegal usage or illegal. I have to review it manually. So I'm just too lazy for this work. I spend 15 minutes to write in this aspect and instrument in the code base. Amazing. And some limitation that I wanted from the very beginning to write some checks to see if someone using a switch operator in a classical way, because I don't like this as well. But unfortunately, with PostSharp, you can't do this because it doesn't analyze the source code. And in this case, you should use Roslyn. So it's one of the limitations. PostSharp analyzes only usage references in one library, only several libraries in the whole project. So the key takeaways. I wouldn't read these bullets, so I left it for you, but I would like to say that your code can be more safe, and you can do a little effort to make it more safe with a PostSharp and make your life easier, and yeah, spend your time with your hobby, friends, family, and not doing this infinite code reviews, just trying to spot these small errors all the time. Write it once and you'll get this compilation warning or errors just when you compile the project. So that's all. Thank you for your attention. And here you can see the links to PostSharp, some technical stuff, examples, book that reference to aspect-oriented programming with a PostSharp, samples, then and the last one links to the code that I just represent to you. So you saw that it's well commented. At least I've tried my best to comment it in a good way, what should be commented and uncommented to see different behaviors. And you can just play with it, just in case you are really curious how this works. Okay, now that's all, and time for your questions. Thank you.
Okay, I see the first question.
Yeah, thank you. Have you tried enforcing these rules or kind of these rules across organization via some, I don't know, nugget packages or any other way to let your developers across organization use the same rules on different projects?
Not yet, but we are using PostSharp on several projects at Volvo, and people are usually not aware about these possibilities. So I'm working only for a half a year, and I try to push all of these techniques, and people are really engaged. So I provide these examples to them, and looks like, yes, they are going to use it. Because usually when we start talking about aspect-oriented programming, everyone start thinking about logging, and that's all. So some maybe tracing additionally. But yeah, we're going to use it. So I couldn't say how it works, but I hope it will work well.
You mean some centralized repository for the rules?
Yes, this is the main point, that someone from R&D department in Volvo will write these aspects and then provide it as a NuGet because they are not connected to a business code. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I see one more question.
Question is, in my everyday work, I did met some similar restrictive rules, etc. But in real life, we usually need some means to mute the restrictions for some code, for some special cases. Do we have ability?
Yes, yeah. I could show once again this example. I just like here, I just provide an empty attribute, and you could see here that, okay, for this dependency manager, it's allowed to add a new reference, because if I remove it, just wait a second, it will compile. I'm going to remove all of these errors, so you could see it in an action. Okay, so right now it compiles succeeded correctly. Okay, just believe me. And if I remove this attribute, I will get an error. So yeah, you could easily switch on, switch off, and you could very flexible tune up what should be checked and provide it as an error or as a warning.
Thank you.
Who else have a question? Okay, I see.
Thanks for the presentation. I wanted to ask you, how does PostSharp compare to FODI?
Yeah, FODI is free of charge, and PostSharp in the ultimate version is kind of pricey. It's main difference usually, but from functional perspective, you will have much more flexibility and usability using the PostSharp. I take a look at FODI. Yes, it has a lot of different plugins that provide you functionality and that you could just get by default as one that implemented in the PostSharp. But the way how you work it in the code without support of Visual Studio or some other things, it's really like a black magic with the FODI. So it's applied somewhere and you have no evidence that it was applied. And PostSharp is supported on a commercial basis and in a very big enterprise company, so you could be sure that performance is really high. So yeah, so it's the main difference that would you like to have a support from Visual Studio or not? Yeah.
Okay, maybe the last question? No, I think that's it. Thanks again.
Yeah, so as we have 3 questions only, and I have a free voucher, so please come to me and I will give it to you. So $700. Thank you.